Hey everyone, and welcome back. So even though President Donald Trump has stated his true strong intentions of getting $2,000 stimulus checks in the pockets of the American people, he'll need to have a lot go his way over the coming months in order to actually make this happen. In today's video, we are going to be covering everything that you need to know. But before we go ahead and dive into for today, if you would like to receive up to $200 in free stock or $200 in free cash, in the pinned comment below, I will be leaving a link to Robinhood. All you have to do is once you click on that link is just sign up for a free account and then simply link your bank account. You do not even have to make an opening deposit. At that point in time, Robinhood will be sending you one free stock worth all the way up to $200. And if you'd rather just have the cash, all you have to do is once you receive the free stock is just sell it for what it's worth and then transfer the cash value right back to your bank account. Okay, so diving right into it for today. So Donald Trump has stated his intentions of making sure that Americans receive $2,000 in their pockets as sort of a rebate on the tariffs that have been taking place. And even though, of course, we have been having to pay more for goods and services because of these tariffs that have been taking place, we are going to be receiving possibly $2,000 if Trump gets his way and is able to get Congress or maybe do some type of executive order. His administration is looking into all, quote, legal options to make this happen, but more than likely, he is going to need congressional support, which means that more than likely, both Republicans and Democrats are going to have to support this unless Republicans pass another reconciliation bill where they pass a bill with only Republican support. But that, of course, is going to require all Republicans pretty much to get behind this idea of a $2,000 stimulus check. Now, we actually already have one bill in Congress by Senator Josh Hawley a couple months ago, back in July. He actually released a bill where they would be sending Americans $600 checks, including dependents. So a family of four, for example, would be receiving $2,400. Now, Trump's idea would actually be even more than that. It would be $2,000 per person. So that theoretically would be, possibly $8,000 per household if it's a household of four people. But first off, we're going to be diving into this bill, what Josh Hawley proposed, and then we're going to be talking about all the hoops that Trump is going to have to possibly jump through over the next few months to actually make this happen. What exactly do the American people think? Do Americans actually believe this is going to take place? I don't know. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We actually have some data that is kind of interesting. So according to The Hill, Senator Josh Hawley has introduced legislation to provide $600 tariff rebates to almost all Americans and to their dependent children, a proposal that would give a family of four $2,400. Hawley said in a statement that, quote, Americans deserve a tax rebate after 4 years of Biden policies that have devastated family savings and livelihoods. He said, quote, like President Trump proposed, my legislation would allow hardworking Americans to benefit from the wealth that Trump's tariffs are returning to the country. The legislation would be modeled on the direct payments Congress authorized in the 2020 CARES Act, which provided $1,200 direct payments to adults and $500 direct payments to children. Hawley teamed up with Senator Bernie Sanders in 2020 to advocate for a second round of $1,200 stimulus checks during the COVID-19 pandemic. The payments would be reduced for households that earn $150,000 or more, a head of household who earns more than $112,500, and individuals who earn more than $75,000. Now, the payments are designed to offset higher prices resulting from tariffs, which produce $30 billion in revenue to the federal government and could provide $150 billion in revenue in 2025. Now, whether or not, Hawley or Republicans are able to team up with other Democrats, such as back in the CARES Act, where, again, Hawley teamed up with Bernie Sanders, who's actually an independent, but he caucuses. He pretty much mostly always votes with the Democrats. If they're able to sort of create an alliance there's going to be a much better chance of this to take place. But whether or not Democrats are going to allow Trump to send out a stimulus check right before the midterm elections, which obviously is only going to help Trump and the Republicans in the midterm elections, I don't know. Hard for me to see, but leave your thoughts in comments below. Now, there's actually some betting odds where Americans are actually betting on whether or not these $2,000 stimulus checks are actually going to be taking place. This is kind of interesting. But before we get into the betting odds, leave a comment below. Do you think this $2,000 stimulus check is actually something that is going to take place by the end of this year? And secondly, do you think it could possibly take place at some point in 2026? Drop a comment below with that. So according to USA Today, President Donald Trump has floated the idea of sending $2,000 tariff dividend checks to Americans. Will it happen? You can place your bets. Bettors on prediction betting sites such as Polymarket and Kalshi seem to be skeptical. President Trump recently suggested the possibility of checks from tariff revenue. He said, quote, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone. He posted November 9th on Truth Social. 3 days later, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt echoed the president's support for the dividends when asked about it on November 12th. She said, quote, the White House is committed to making that happen. Yes, and we are currently exploring all legal options to get that done. Now, again, pretty much, I mean, they can look at all the legal options possible, but more than likely, doing this via an executive order, it's not going to be possible. They are going to have to do this more than likely with congressional approval, which again is going to mean, you know, Republicans passing this bill in the House with mostly Republican support. And then in the Senate, they're going to need at least a few Democrats to join all Republicans in this bill. In the Senate right now, there are 53 Republicans, which means that if all 53 Republicans vote in favor of this bill, which more than likely they're not going to garner the support from more fiscally conservative Republicans such as Rand Paul, that say maybe 3 Republicans don't vote in favor of the bill. At that point, they're down to 50 Republicans, which means they'll need at least 10 Democrats to reach these 60 vote threshold in the Senate to avoid the filibuster from taking place. And then, of course, another alternative, another option that Republicans have would be to pass another reconciliation bill like the big, beautiful bill that they just passed. It would pass with only Republican support, which means that in the Senate, they would only need 50 votes, and then Vice President J.D. Vance would be the tie-breaking vote. Now, as far as what Polymarket thinks about the likelihood of these tariff dividend checks actually taking place, activity on Polymarkets as of Saturday, November 15th, suggests that users are skeptical about dividend checks being sent to Americans. The site gives a 7% likelihood for President Trump creating a tariff dividend in 2025 with more than $950,000 in volume. Betting began on October 3rd and rose to 17% on November 9th, but has fallen since then. So today is November 16th. If he was going to make this happen by the end of this year, he would only have around 6 to 7 weeks to actually, you know, make this happen. That's probably not enough time for them to create some type of bill in Congress and then pass it, or, you know, even have a reconciliation bill. He would be really against the wall. And I think, in all honesty, if Republicans and Trump want to make this happen, they'd probably want to have the checks go out as close to the midterm elections next November 2026 as possible. So maybe if you get a check in the hand of Americans in October of 2026, you know, just a few weeks before the elections, that way it's fresh in the minds of Americans. If you're receiving this check in January of 2026, but then the elections not until another 10 months, more than likely Americans, independents, those people who are more likely to possibly swing either Republican or Democrat, they might forget about those checks, and that may not, you know, favor in their minds as much. Now, they go on here to say that Polymarket also had another tariff dividend wager suggest a likelihood of 26% for President Trump to create a tariff dividend by March 31st, 2026. That outcome, with wagering initiated on November 9th, hit a high of 44% on November 13th, but the odds for yes have fallen since then. Fewer folks are wagering on this outcome as the volume has surpassed $19,620. Another wager started on November 13th and lacking enough activity to have a posted volume poses the question of whether Americans will get tariff stimulus checks by December 31st. The likelihood rested at 6% on Saturday, November 15th. And so, you know, it's pretty apparent there that, you know, most Americans, when asked, they don't believe that these stimulus checks are actually going to take place, which might make it so if Trump actually does make this happen, if Trump and Republicans are able to make this happen, that might actually favor better in the minds of the American people if they are able to overcome those odds. Especially Americans don't believe this is actually going to be something that happens. They don't believe Trump and his intentions to send $2,000 stimulus checks. But again, leave your thoughts and comments below. Now, one of the big hurdles that Trump actually has to get through before these checks would even be possible is the Supreme Court not overturning the tariffs that are taking place, because these tariffs may not in fact actually be legal. So we actually asked ChatGPT, is the Supreme Court likely to rule against Trump's tariffs? And if so, when are they expected to make a judgment? They say the core legal issue is whether the president can impose broad tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act without new legislation from Congress. The lower courts found that the tariffs in question exceed presidential authority. The Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit Court ruled in a 7-4 decision that many of the tariffs were unlawful because Congress had not authorized the president to impose tariffs under the IEEPA. Now, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case on an expedited basis with oral arguments scheduled on November 5th, 2025. So those, of course, have already started. Now, the likelihood of ruling against the tariffs. It said that trade and legal experts estimate the odds of the court ruling against the tariffs are in the 70 to 80% range. So it's a very high likelihood that these tariffs do get overturned. And they do expect that. Many analysts expect a decision by early 2026. Some expect by the end of 2025, given the expedited schedule. So we may know, possibly by the end of this year, whether or not these tariffs are actually going to hold up, or if the Supreme Court is going to overturn them. And of course, if the Supreme Court overturns them and they're no longer allowed, well, at that point, the $2,000 stimmy checks are pretty much completely out the window, unless they just send some type of stimulus package without like any of this revenue coming in. That is even less likely to take place. But we'll have to wait and see. But again, leave your thoughts and comments below. Do you think that Trump is actually going to make this happen by the midterm elections next year in 2026? Leave your thoughts and comments below. But that's all we have for today's video, and I will see you in the next one.